So, if you're following my video series, you're probably starting to get a pretty good handle on the things that you should be doing in game. What we haven't discussed is the things that you should probably avoid or not do altogether. And this isn't meant to be a mandate. Everyone should play this game the way they want to play. The purpose of this video is for me to share some ideas of things that are probably not a good idea and the reasons why that is the case. Let's get right to it. All right, the first thing I'm going to discuss is drug use prior to reaching level 15. And I used to tell my players, don't ever do drugs before level 15, and I'm starting to change my way of thinking a little bit. The main point I want to make here is this. Until you reach level 15, there's no way to do rehab. This means if you're using drugs prior to reaching level 15, you have no way to manage addiction. Additionally, there's some drugs like ecstasy, which a lot of new players use for good reasons. However, if you overdose on ecstasy and you can't get to rehab, you're going to be in a bad way. Most notably, you have no easy and effective way of dealing with the happiness loss, and this is really going to hurt your gym gains in the short term. So I'm not going to tell you not to use drugs prior to level 15, but I am going to ask that you review the wiki on any drug before you start using it. Most importantly, look at what happens if you happen to overdose. With a lot of drugs, the chance of overdose is relatively low, and with a lot of the drugs, the effects of overdose is not usually negative, but be aware of what's going to happen if you do overdose on a drug. The next topic I want to talk about is selling losses, sometimes referred to in-game as slutting. The basic idea with selling losses is that a newer player can attack a more seasoned player with every intention of losing that fight, and this helps that player to get defends, which helps them out with various things they're trying to achieve in the game. Selling losses can be an effective way to make money quickly. However, it involves you using your most important resource, namely energy, to get this money. I'm not going to tell you not to sell losses, but I am going to encourage you to reach out to faction leadership to verify that it is or isn't allowed before you go down that road. The other bit of advice I'm going to offer is that sometimes there's some third-party risk associated with selling losses. What I mean by this is a player may promise to pay you in exchange for losing on purpose, and in the end, not pay you the money you have earned. If a player like this who's level 94 happens to welch on a deal, the bottom line is there's nothing you're going to be able to do to get your money. The other point I'll make is that there may be other ways to make money in-game without using your energy. So just give some thought to these points before you consider selling losses. The next point I'm going to make is that you should avoid at all costs letting your energy and nerve bars fill completely. And we've talked about this in previous videos, but when you let your bars fill completely, you're going to lose the natural regeneration that occurs. We all have to sleep or do other important things in our lives at some point. This is just a general thing you want to avoid if you can. On a similar topic, you'll want to avoid this cooldown timer going completely empty. That means this booster cooldown timer here and this drug cooldown timer here. In the case of boosters, this is your chance to use candy for something like a gem train or possibly alcohol to get additional nerve for crimes. When this timer goes completely empty, it basically means you're missing out on easy opportunities to do better in the game. And the same can be said for the drug cooldown. When this sits empty, it means you aren't taking Xanax regularly, which is generally going to be good for your game. The other thing you're going to want to avoid is missing days online in Torn. Like I said before, everybody has real-world obligations and other things to do outside of playing a game. That said, with just a few minutes of activity, doing something in Torn is enough to maintain an activity streak. When you go offline for a day or two at a time, you run the risk of losing your job in a private company or possibly getting kicked out of a faction. We've said it before, but it's worth repeating again. Never buy property as a new player in Torn. You should always rent. Buying property is not a good investment in this game and should only be done late in your Torn career when you have lots of money and lots of other investments in hand. The next thing I want to talk about is trying to fly under the radar as a brand new player in Torn. I recommend you avoid speaking in global chat completely. Nothing good is going to happen by speaking in global chat. Furthermore, if you go up here, you can leave this channel, and now there's zero risk of clicking that accidentally. Similarly, trade chat as a brand new player is a bad idea. and I would recommend that you leave this channel as well. This chat here is for a private company. This is a chat you should read and speak in because this is your company director telling you what you should and shouldn't be doing as it relates to their company. This is your faction chat, and you should read and engage in this chat regularly. Another area where I would encourage a brand new player to avoid speaking is here in the forums. There's a lot of really good information here, and I encourage you to read to your heart's content. But as a brand new player in Torn, I would avoid speaking in public forums. I see a lot of new players posing questions here in this forum thread, and in many cases, these are very basic questions. This gets to my next point. Avoid asking very simple questions. More specifically, I would encourage you to use the resource when it comes to very basic search terms, in this specific example, armor. If you have questions about different armor types, everything you need to know is contained in this wiki post. I would also recommend that you avoid chatting up random players. As a brand new player, chatting up this random person that I don't know is probably just going to get me some unwanted attention. This gets me to my next topic. Don't take attacks personally. Right before this video started, I was attacked and arrested by this player. The reality is that attacks are going to happen. You're going to get hospitalized. You're going to get mugged. You're going to get arrested. You're going to get bountied. This is part of Torn. Taking these attacks personally, or more specifically, retaliating against the player that just attacked you as a brand new player, is probably just going to get you attacked more and more. As a more specific example, if I was to message this person and say they were a piece of crap for attacking me, I probably have all but guaranteed I'm going to get attacked a second time. The other thing I'm going to encourage you not to do is beg in Torn. This is particularly true here in the forums, but really applies to most any player that you know in game. It's a totally different thing if a more experienced and established player offers to help you out in some kind of way, but begging for free stuff is probably not a good idea. Back to the subject of attacking, I would generally recommend that a brand new player needs to avoid attacking other players. There are some special situations where you need to attack, including things like chaining, which your faction may be involved in. When it comes to attacking random players, I would recommend a few things. First and foremost, it's best if the player you're attacking is not in a faction. When you attack a player in a faction, there's a good chance that their entire faction is going to see that you've attacked one of their members and potentially retaliate. Another good general rule as it relates to attacking random players is avoiding players like this who were online fairly recently. While we're on this topic, it's a good time to mention that if you happen to have subscriber or donator status, that you have something here called advanced search. One thing I love about advanced search is I can specifically look for a player that's not in a faction and has been offline for some length of time. This advanced search tool is excellent for getting chaining targets and is one of the reasons that I think being a donator or subscriber in Torn is a very good idea. When you attack another player, you're generally going to get three options: leave, mug, and hospitalize. And as a general rule, I would recommend you always click leave. There are some exceptions to this rule, but as a general statement, when you mug or hospitalize another player, particularly active players, you're going to get them angrier than you would by just leaving them on the street. We also covered this in a previous video, but I want to reiterate the importance of completing Introduction to Biochemistry and Intravenous Therapy as your first two education courses in Torn. I would not do any other course until you've completed these first two critical courses. When it comes to using merits, you should spend all of your merit points on education length first until it's completely filled, and then bank interest until that is completely filled. In my mind, doing anything but education first and bank second is a mistake. In my experience, new players often like to spend their money on things that they consider to be important. This often includes things like weapons and armor. Your faction most likely provides the weapons and armor that you need to get by in the early days of playing Torn. My recommendation here is simple. Avoid spending your money and instead try to invest in the bank until you have $2 billion invested. Use your money instead for the things your faction may not provide, namely candy, Xanax, and your private island rental. On a related topic, it's my opinion that being factionless in this game is a bad idea. There's so many good things to gain in being in a faction. And whether you had a bad experience in your first faction or you're just a little shy about joining one, I would strongly encourage you to find a faction that's a good fit for you. Similarly, I feel everybody should be married in Torn. The best reason to be married is it provides you and your spouse an opportunity to split housing costs, which can be very big for you early game. If you have any trouble at all finding a spouse in Torn, don't hesitate to ask your faction mates. And don't think twice about a same-sex marriage. There are lots and lots of dudes married to dudes in Torn, and lots of females married to females in Torn. One problem that a lot of new players face is that they're constantly getting mugged in Torn. This is because they made the mistake of having money on hand when they weren't online. One of the easiest ways to get mugging to stop is by having your pockets empty as often as possible. If a player returns a second or third time for a mug and you had no money, they'll move on to a new target. Another way that a lot of players lose money is by gambling in the casino. As a general rule, I would recommend that new players avoid the casino altogether. There are, however, some exceptions to this rule, including daily spinning of the Wheel of Lame and the Wheel of Mediocrity, which over the long run are going to make you a little bit of money. This wheel in the center, the Wheel of Awesome, is a loser in the long run. There are also some easy merits to earn in-game by gambling in the casino. As a general rule, I would encourage you to use the smallest wage possible to get those merits. One mistake that I made when I was a newer player in Torn was neglecting missions. Missions are the only way to earn these mission points, which are the only way to buy mods like this one here. The earning of these points is heavily time-gated because of how quickly these missions repopulate. For this reason, I would encourage all players to be consistent in doing missions on a regular basis. Another mistake that I made as a newer player in Torn is I failed to get daily items here in the city markets, which can be resold on the item market at a profit. This kitten plushie here for $50 and this teddy bear plushie here for $30 are just two random examples of items that can be bought here for cheap and sold here in the item market for a profit. This is an easy daily way to get free money, so don't forget to buy your 100 items daily. When it comes to crimes, I see a lot of newer players kind of stretching beyond their ability trying to earn money in Torn. My general advice is this: start with search for cash and slowly work your way up each time you reach 100 skill to the next crime. I know some players are likely to deviate from this advice, so let me just add one final point. If you were to get a critical fail on a harder crime, I would strongly encourage that you temporarily jump back to some easier crimes for a while before attempting to do another difficult crime. Multiple critical fails in crimes is going to be detrimental to your progress in the game. Thank you for watching the video today. If you feel I left any important things out, don't hesitate to let me know in the comments below. Y'all have a great day. We'll see you next time.